Well, hello everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Up Late with Ben Northey. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm on here in the People's Republic of Moreland, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Well, it's the start of a great week for the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, who have been busily recording special projects, many of which are for the upcoming launch of MSO Live. Now, MSO Live, for those people who don't know, is the online digital experience of the MSO, which will include live concerts, audio recordings, archived performances, and educational concerts and resources, much, much more even, all things MSO. But more details will be released very soon about this new online digital platform, MSO Live, and you can register your interest on the MSO webpage. I encourage you to go there. But, you know, as you can imagine, it's been extraordinary to see the musicians performing together again. So at the MSO, you know, we've been doing these recording sessions. It's been incredibly moving to see and hear everyone together and be reminded of just how good these musicians are. We haven't been able to get together in huge numbers yet, but as many as we can fit on the stage with the distancing requirements. We've still got to spread out a little bit. And I can say that the players are in absolutely top form, sounding superb. Even though I can imagine it must feel very strange to them not having played together for so long, but it's as if they never stopped, honestly. It's just fantastic. So for new viewers, this interview show is a chance to get to know some of these musicians behind the instruments in the MSO, to discover what led them to become professional musicians, and to get an insight into their experiences of life among Australia's leading music makers. And as we've seen so far, these are really special creative people, each with a unique character and story to tell. And after all, that's what an orchestra is. It's a collection of individuals who come together to create something greater and more beautiful than they could achieve by themselves. And it's this combination of personalities and characters that makes every orchestra different. And I hope that you've enjoyed the chance to get to know these musicians better, and that when live concerts resume, you have a deeper connection with the performances of the musicians of the orchestra through these chats. And don't forget, for those of you watching live, you can put any questions you have for tonight's guest in the chat window on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll get to as many of them as I can later in the chat, as always. And I'm sure there'll be plenty tonight, because tonight we have a leading figure in Australian orchestral music. And I hope he wouldn't mind me saying he's perhaps one of the most recognizable classical musicians in the country. He's the principal viola of the MSO, and many audience members would also know him from his previous decade as principal viola of the Australian Chamber Orchestra, with whom he performed across the nation and around the world. And there's such a stunning orchestra, the ACO. I can't wait to hear more about that experience tonight. And also to hear about the special and unique musical role the viola plays in an orchestra, sitting right in the middle of the string section, playing all those fascinating inside voices and harmonies, but also used as a beautiful solo instrument quite often as well. And I did some research, and it was the favoured string instrument of, and actually was played by, Johann Sebastian Bach, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Dvorak, Schubert, Mendelssohn, Glinka, Hindemith, Frank Bridge, Vaughan Williams, Brett Dean, conductors Charles Dutoit, Carlo Giulini, Pierre Monteau, Bruno Volta. Even the famous operatic soprano Elisabeth Schwarzkopf played the viola. It's just amazing. What a lineup. Imagine hearing all of them play together. But the best of the bunch is my guest tonight. And it's my great pleasure to welcome, direct from his sprawling, well, almost semi-rural estate in suburban Melbourne, it's Christopher Moore. A big welcome to you, Chris.
Hi, Ben. Hi, everyone else at home watching. How are you?
What's been going on in the Moore household this Arvo, Chris? Because every time I speak to you, there seems to be baking going on. I'm imagining that's happening. Is that correct?
Well, today was a bit more of a clean-up, because we did have a little bit of a shindig with most of the viola section here last night. Now that we can have people over to our house, and we've got.
Oh, that must have been great. That must have been wonderful. Are there any of them still there, just hanging around?
No, thank God. No? And I think I may have said to a few of them at some stage, "I'm never drinking ever again." But
welcome to Up Late with Ben Northey.
Yeah,
that's right.
I don't think I have a choice. Cheers. Cheers.
A big thank you to Tarawara for their support of Up Late with Ben Northey as well. Gee, we've got off to a good start here, Chris. This is wonderful, ticking all the boxes. And what about the chooks? Because I know you're an avid chook farmer. And are they fed and all? Is it all done? The duties, the chook duties out the backyard there?
We just fill up a big thing and they walk in and eat the food. It lasts for 10 days, so we don't have to do very much. They're very low maintenance.
When I say chooks, I feel a bit sort of that I'm underselling them, because we're talking about exotic chooks, really, aren't we? These are exotic chickens. They've got names that I've never heard before. What's in your current flock at the moment?
Current flock we've got 2 Wyandottes, 2 Lavender Sussexes, one white Sussex, a Leghorn, very full of character, and the other one we don't know.
Any silkies?
No, that unfortunately they passed away, or the fox.
Passed away. The fox.
You can have foxes here in Bentley East.
I see. Wow, that is rural. Like I said, semi-rural. What about Belgian duckles? You mentioned duckles. You got a couple.
Belgian duckles. Yes, it's funny. We got some Belgian duckles, and then eventually we heard someone say Belgian Duclays, and then we just thought it.
That's the height of pretension, isn't it?
Yeah,
Belgian Duclays,
darling.
Maybe it's correct. Who knows? But I love the fact that these exotic breeds of chooks have kind of got some lingerie-esque sort of link, like the silver-laced Wyandottes.
Yes.
And the silkies. I wonder if there's a link between the breeds of chickens and kinds of underwear. Probably not. But anyway,
possibly.
Look, moving quickly.
Very soft.
Moving quickly back to the viola, yeah. I imagine it's a uniquely multifaceted job to play orchestral viola, specifically orchestral viola, because I suppose it's like constantly being surrounded in some way. You've got all these other stringed instruments either side of you demanding something of you and needing to be accommodated. Is it frustrating to be in the position of being pushed and pulled around like that? Or is it one of the things that you love about the role of the instrument in the orchestra?
Yeah, I was drawn to it, I think, probably for the same reasons that, I don't want to say that, it makes me sound pretentious, but the same reason that Bach, I mean, his incredible love, obviously, and gift for harmony and counterpoint. And that's, the viola is really in the engine room of the orchestra or chamber music or whatever you're playing. So that really, I was drawn to that for sure. And this, it's pushing and pulling. I mean, it happens from within as well. I mean, it would be dull if it was just from just from one side to the other. You understand? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
there's a lot to be done in that role. Actually, it's funny if you think I've often heard cellists say when they play the Rossini sonatas, which is just bass, cello, 2 violins, and so the cello then plays the role of the viola, and then they quite amazed how different the role is. It's every person has every instrument has a different role in the band for sure.
Yeah, but I feel like it's somehow unique in the sense that it's such a linking voice between those upper and lower voices. I mean, if you had to pick, is it a higher stringed instrument or a lower stringed instrument? It's kind of a silly binary question.
Well, when conductors such as yourself, they say, I'm just lower strings. I often ask, well, does that include
what does that mean?
Yeah.
Upper strings is silly because it's just violins.
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't make any sense
at all.
It could
be us too.
But that's how it started. That's true. That's how it started for you, though, wasn't it? Because obviously, very few people would be ever starting on a viola, and as a youngster, it all began on the violin for you. And you were brought up in Newcastle. Mm-hmm. And so tell me about your early childhood memory of your introduction to the violin.
Oh, just one moment. I've got to...
Is this a baking alarm?
The baking alarm.
I knew there'd be baking going on.
No, just repeat that alarm.
Seriously, I'm expecting a Belgian Duclays to wander past at any moment. It's rustic.
They're no longer with us, I'm afraid. But this
that would be...
the irony of this, Ben, is that I don't even eat the bread anymore. But if my daughters realise that there's no good bread, they call it, I want the good bread. they realise there's none of that, there are tears. So
what are we making here, actually?
This is just a country brown loaf.
Yep.
Oh, I've lost my rag. Anyway, so what was the question?
Well, I mean, we could just turn this into a baking documentary right now, as far as I'm concerned. That's very Melbourne lockdown, isn't it? I mean, is it something you've done more of this year, or was it just always something you did?
It was never something I did. It was the lockdown thing. I figured, seeing as I'm there the whole time, I'm not going anywhere. I can tend to my microbes in the proofing cupboard, keep looking after them, experiment with different things. And
I'm going to ask you a bit more about your other interests, because you brew beer and all kinds of things. But anyway, we should stick to music for a little while.
Yeah.
We were talking about your introduction to the violin and your vivid early memory of your introduction to the instrument. Do you want to tell us about that?
The first thing I remember of the fiddle was Mum. We used to drive, what was it, a Renault, an old Renault station wagon.
Yep.
I remember her arriving in the driveway with the blue violin case on the back seat. That might have been when I was 5 years old or something like that. So,
wow.
We just launched into it and had a few lessons with a fellow in Newcastle, but then very quickly we shifted to having lessons in Sydney every Saturday morning. So it was... Yeah,
this is a common theme throughout these discussions, is that there's usually, for people who are born, at and raised out of the big cities, there's a commute involved. There's always a commute. So were mum and dad musicians or musical people as well?
Yeah. Well, I don't think my father would mind me saying that he's quite possibly the very definition of tone deaf. He and his brother used to sing in the choir at school. This is in rural country, New South Wales.
Yeah.
And the teacher said, "You more boys, you can open your mouths, but don't make a sound." So that was my father. That is my father. But Mum, she learnt piano as a youngster, and she ever since I was sort of, a twinkle in my father's eye, I think she was singing in the Newcastle University choir. So since its inception. So when she was pregnant with me, she was singing in the choir, and it's always been a major part of our lives, really.
Well, it shows a lot of foresight to bring a violin back for the 5-year-old and get you that start. And I'm presuming, similar to Tiffany Cheng, who we spoke to last week, who was brought up in Wollongong, it was Suzuki, right? Is that the Suzuki method you were learning from?
Yeah.
And you had great teachers through primary school, I'm imagining, as well.
My biggest influence, I would say, was Marjorie Heistek, who I still see occasionally. When I used to see her more often when I was playing in the ACO. But she's a wonderful, wonderful woman, and not to be trifled with. She's incredible.
Right. Yeah. And you were telling me also you found a DVD of when you were much younger recently, and that was with Marjorie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And tell us about that.
Oh well, yeah. It was. I wasn't really surprised, but I watched the video and I didn't look particularly interested in what was going on. I think I was staring off the window, looking and seeing if I could run out, the open window. And it was nothing particularly special. I mean, it was, I just thought, God, if you saw him, if I saw a young kid of his age playing like that, I'd go, well, he'll probably take up roller skating and, give up.
Oh, there's hope for all of these budding musicians yet. All of these kids who look slightly disinterested and bored as they work their way. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I suppose at that age, sometimes it's just hard to play. You're learning and it doesn't sound great, and
especially string instruments. I mean,
totally.
I mean, I was learning piano as well from Marjorie, so that's very different. I mean, that has its own difficulties. I mean, left and right hand together, it's very hard.
Yeah, but
too.
At least you can play a tune straight away almost, or you can play in tune at least on the strings.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Like, how long was it before you made a sound that you thought, actually, that's pretty good?
years, like
Yeah, there you go.
decades.
And I can see, speaking of stringed instruments in the background, there are some double basses. They're not yours, are they? So your wife, Jill, she's also a musician. Is that right?
She is. No, well, no, she's a bass player. But
I'm not going down the road of...
On her CV, it says, I think, furniture removal is first and then double bass. But
you have to be both.
Yeah.
You have to be both. And what about your kids? Because you've got 2 daughters.
Yeah,
are they musical as well?
2 double basses there. So you can see the big ones, that's Jill's, and the other one, that's Isabella. She's 12 years old. She's playing the bass. She did play the viola for a while.
Yep.
But that didn't.
Moved on to a different role model.
I mean, the bass is much more cool anyway. But Dorothea, you can see the piano there as well. That's with Dorothea bashes away. And there's another keyboard right behind me you can't see, but it's the house is sort of packed full of instruments.
Is it all
there?
The theremin. And that's your pride and joy, isn't it? The theremin. Yeah. It's just, I
mean,
you've almost got the makings of a family band. It's the Von Trapp family around there.
Yeah.
Tell me about, so are your kids also studying the Suzuki school?
Yep.
Through that method? Yeah.
Yes, indeed. But I mean, Isabella at the moment doesn't have a teacher, but so Jill's performing that role.
Yep.
Which I wouldn't recommend to anyone really, but no, they're both sometimes they like it, sometimes they hate it. It's a journey. It's more about the discipline, really at this stage, I think. But they seem to enjoy it, and they can do some amazing things, which is great to see.
Yeah. Well, back to your development through school. So you're sticking with the violin through primary school. You're traveling to Sydney on the weekends for your lessons. It's obviously become a focus through secondary school. Would that be right to say?
Yeah. I mean, also I didn't really have very many friends in high school. I think they were all in the year above me, and especially year 10 when all my older friends left. At least I had the fiddle. That was sort of kept me going. So probably then when I really started to take it sort of more seriously.
And so you went to uni, to the conservatorium there.
Yep.
And this is where you started to kind of branch out into ensemble playing. Is that right?
Yep.
So I'm fascinated by this story about how you paid your way through uni. I'd love you to tell us about that.
Well, I don't think my parents would probably have preferred me to give some of the earnings to them, but because I was living there for a lot of that time. But I think I decided I'd better get a job. So I looked in the paper and sort of thought, oh, that'll do. I saw an advertisement for packing shelves at Woolworths.
Yeah.
And my boss, I did it. I lasted a week, but I think because my boss was this sort of balding, moustached woman in her 50s that just she was a very cranky, sort. Almost swore. So I think I'm a little bit OCD. So it took me a little too long to arrange the
right.
bags of
had to be right. Had to be perfect.
And she didn't like that very much. So I didn't last very long. So then I thought, well, I've got to earn money. And so a friend of mine, Ricky Waller and Shona, a viola player. Ricky Waller was a pianist and fiddle player. And various cellists from around the place. We just played quartets at weddings or piano and violin stuff, all sorts of ensembles, and it got out of control really. And had my mum sitting at home with the MYOB, which is Mind Your Own Business, this software, doing everything. It was out of control. But
you're describing an empire, really. I mean, this is a musical empire.
Yeah, but it was fun. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, how to work with people, I guess, and just deal with challenges that come up, and and I also learned how to arrange do a quartet arrangement of Stairway to Heaven in the car on the way up to Pecolban because I'd forgotten to do it, so things like that. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, this is the real world, Chris. I mean, this is it. It's also great to see the functionality of music and the fact that that it really does serve a very, very specific and meaningful purpose
Yeah.
at things like those significant life milestones, weddings, functions, funerals, all that kind of thing. People turn to music.
Yeah.
And as somebody who played my share of weddings, let me tell you, I found that to be a really valuable lesson. So that must have been hard to let go of, because I suppose, as you say, it was doing very well. You'd cornered the market and were making money. So how did you actually get out of that?
Oh, well, essentially I was moving into a sort of career as an orchestral player. So
yeah.
So that was sort of taking over. It's in the end, I had no choice because I was moving to Adelaide.
Yeah, right.
To play violin in that section there.
Yep.
So we just handed the business on to very good friends of mine, Trevor and Tanya Me, who took it over, and they're still doing gigs. It was an awful.
Wow.
We called it Camerata Musicale. It was like, oh, if I'd had it my way, now the benefit of hindsight, you would think that's a really stupid name, but
not really. I think it stands up to most names. They're all pretty hard to pick,
Yeah, but it seemed to work.
Good on you. I think that's fantastic. But obviously your career trajectory took you to the orchestra. Yeah. And you're playing violin at this stage. I have to keep reminding myself. But you get to Adelaide, which is, I think, where I first met you, because you started in Adelaide in 2001, and I believe I was there assisting Graham Abbott on a production of Don Giovanni, and I'm sure we may have had a beer with the orchestra or something during that period. Then it's likely. But we need to address the switch to the viola, because it wasn't just ASO that you played the violin with. You played violin as a contractor with New Zealand Symphony Orchestra as well.
I got a job there actually on fiddle. So
yeah, right. And so tell us about this switch to. I mean, I read this fantastic quote that you always thought the violin made your head look big.
I was going to say that you took the words out of my mouth.
Stealing your best material.
But I do have a large head. But no, well, I was in Adelaide there for a year. I was playing in the section in the violin section. They swap it. They don't have a first or second violin section there. You just play whatever, which is wonderful. So I was doing that for a year, and then a contract came up in the viola section, because one of the violas was going off to have a baby, and they heard that I owned a viola. So that was apparently all you need to do to get a contract.
That's got to be not true.
No, it's partly true. I did do an audition and won that contract. So right. That's really it. I mean, and because I did own a viola. I did buy a viola because I was just attracted to the sound and the instrument, and I dabbled as a kid. I've been asked to play in sort of ensembles with in string ensembles at Suzuki workshops and things like that. So I loved it. I had a love for it.
Oh, that must have been it's great. Yeah, I was just going to say, in the Adelaide Symphony, they play such a variety of repertoire. You must have really enjoyed that experience there.
It's wonderful. You play in the pit, you play opera, you play ballet, you play like Sondheim musicals, you play symphonic works, you play all sorts of things. So it's quite a varied, quite a lot of variety there, which kept me, which was good for someone who was who couldn't read the viola clef or alto clef. Not at all.
You're going to have to tell me how that works one day as well. Yeah. Very difficult. For those people who don't know, it's right in the middle of the clef. So it's not treble clef, it's not bass clef. They've got their own unique alto clef, and yes, it does take a bit of getting used to, I have to say.
Yeah.
And then a viola job comes up in Melbourne, right? And you end up.
Yeah, I don't know how much to say, but my I think I did go to New Zealand and got the violin job, but I'd left a tape behind for the viola job in Adelaide, and I got them both actually. So I had to make a choice. Right. And then I discovered that the my girlfriend wasn't really my girlfriend anymore, if you know what I mean.
Oh,
And I got back, so I was in a bit of a state. So I actually said no to
oh,
both of them. I didn't. I
yep,
said no to both jobs, so I had nothing.
yep.
And then the job in Melbourne came up, and so I madly scrambled and practiced and drove to Melbourne and did the audition.
The rich tapestry
Thank
of
God it.
life, and just taking you in all these random, seemingly random directions,
Yeah,
Chris, and then all of a sudden it works out for the best.
yeah,
And so I vividly remember you playing in Melbourne Symphony Orchestra as well. You ended up getting the number 2 job there, and then the opportunity comes up to play with the Australian Chamber Orchestra. And
Hmm.
so tell us about those first experiences with ACO, because I find this to be a really formative,
Yeah.
big,
Oh, for sure.
substantial part of your career. So I'm fascinated to talk more about it.
Yeah. Well, I was engaged, though I think Caroline Henbest had left for the second time. Uh, she was the principal twice in
Yep.
that band. So she'd left again, and so they were searching for somebody. I didn't know that really, but they just booked me to do a gig, to do a season for 3 weeks, and then I think a short tour to Kuala Lumpur, and that was in March 2006. And well, actually, after they booked me, they called me a few days later and said, "Oh, by the way, we want you to audition." And I'd never even thought of it, and I just went. Well, I just said, "Oh, sure, okay, fine." And now the rehearsal schedule at ACO is always it's 10 to 5 on the Tuesday, 10 to 5 on the Wednesday, and then 12 to 7 on the Thursday to accommodate some either sponsors or long-term subscribers coming in and getting a little sneak peek of the last half hour of the rehearsals. Anyway, so then of course, so I did the first 2 days of rehearsals, and then at 11 o'clock on the Thursday morning, that was the audition.
Oh man,
Bang.
big week.
And so you've got to think to yourself, if I don't get it, they're not going to tell me until the end of the tour. You
Yes,
know what
you
I
would
mean?
hope. You would hope
So,
so. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But luckily, Tognetti comes in and says, "You got it." So, which I couldn't believe. But it's funny. I did hear about the discussions they had in the background, in the room out the back, which I was not privy to, but I have my sources, of course. But apparently, Tognetti said he's great, but there seems to be a huge gap in his education, and by that, of course, he meant I hadn't been overseas or
Yeah.
been any teachers that he recognised, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So it just goes to show, really, that's
Has that been something that you've been conscious of in your career? Is it sort of something that comes up every now and again where people say, "Oh, the expectation of having studied somewhere in Europe or America." I mean,
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It happens quite a bit, but I know plenty of very fine musicians who haven't been overseas or
exactly, and I
but
think it's
some
it's more
people,
and more common now
yeah.
too. I mean,
Well,
and it's
some people need it, and some people want that
yeah,
experience and whatnot.
yeah.
But I guess you have other ways of learning things, through your life experience and whatnot.
Well, speaking of a musical education, I'm sure it doesn't come much better than playing in the ACO for 10 years either,
Yeah,
because, this is an organization, an orchestra that's described as the world's best chamber orchestra, and is an incredibly high level, incredibly high level group though. And I imagine that must have been, and everyone's a soloist. I mean, you're only as good as the weakest link in a group.
yeah.
How many players are even in the ACO in the full
It's
complement?
17. When it is full, it's 17 players. So
Yeah.
so
Yep.
yeah, that is really what makes it special. Is the each individual in the band. They're all very dedicated to a fault, probably. I would say. I mean, 10 years of that sort of. I wouldn't say pressure. It's just it's a lot of dedication you need to give to the job. To the band.
What
But
did you
that's what
learn?
makes it special.
What did you learn? How did you change during that period, do you think?
Well, it's hard to tell whether it was just uh, whether it was that or whether the band or whether it was just I was getting older. But certainly I was, my colleagues in Melbourne remember me as this sort of young, uh, young bull, uh, bit, a bit obnoxious perhaps, but you know, how old was I? I was probably 20, 25, 26
Yeah,
when
still
I
very
met.
young. Yeah.
Your brain doesn't stop developing.
Yep.
Mine hasn't. It still hasn't finished, actually.
And what about did it give you confidence? Did it give you some real confidence? Because I imagine
Yeah.
it's the intensity of that kind of music making must be very, very formative and quite unique, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to take a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
It's a smaller band, of course, but you have to you you have to take charge a lot more because there is no conductor, and it really is. It's much more nimble. So you do have that. It is like playing chamber music. It's like playing a quartet, but
Yeah.
on steroids, of course. But yeah, I mean, but also I learned a lot. Well, I learned a lot of what things not to do as well. But I learned how to be with people and be comfortable in myself and be accepting of all all the differences in other people. That's sort
Yeah.
of, especially in that band. It's a motley crew. So
I can imagine. Was it
not a
slightly?
motley,
Was it because it comes across, iconoclastic and it is that. But was it sort of slightly rock and roll, the touring life, and was it sort of just it felt like you were in a band a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, especially when we were going overseas, it was like the schedules were outrageous sometimes.
Yeah.
And yeah, you do a concert at 8 o'clock that finishes at 10:30. You're getting to the hotel at 11. You may be having a beer, going to bed at 12:30, getting up at 5 to get on another flight to go to the next city. It's just, you really look forward in that 2-3 week tour. You really look forward to that day off in the middle.
Yeah, and I can imagine that's got implications for your family life, which has started at
Yeah.
some point during this period with ACO. I just should point out there's heaps of questions coming in too. Keep them coming, people, because we'll get to those
Well, okay.
very soon. But I mean, how many days a year were you on the road in the ACO
About
normally?
110 days on the road, so
It's a
a
substantial
lot.
number.
And
Yeah.
that doesn't include the concerts that you do when you're in. The bulk of the concerts were in Sydney because that's where most of the subscribers were. So it's not even including those, and the ones in Newcastle and Wollongong. But yeah,
Yeah, and the thing that also struck me about and still does about ACO is that you get that more individual connection with players. There seems to be there's because it's a smaller group, I suppose. There's more focus on the individual members of the orchestra, and that's one of the great things about this show. Is that we get to meet and learn more about people. But did you find that was a real difference between the bigger orchestras and ACO as well? That contact with donors and subscribers.
yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, when you think about it, there are 10,000 subscribers to ACO.
Yeah,
I'm not sure whether that figure's still the same
yeah,
or whatnot, but yeah, it's a significant amount of people, and there are a lot of donors, and a lot of sponsors, etc., etc. And the, the band works so well because they really foster those relationships a lot. So yeah, essentially I learned a lot there as well, and how to kind of, well, in the beginning, I must tell you this story. But the two IC, the second in charge at ACO, I think one of the first dinners, she made sure that I was sitting next to her because she was slightly worried what I was going to say. But I was on my best behaviour, shall we? Which I don't know whether she agreed with that. But yeah, there's you've got a responsibility to kind of to look after the foster the relationships of the people that are looking after the institution or the arts, essentially.
yeah. And that's something that I think you've brought to MSO with you as well, and it's something the bigger orchestras are doing much more. I think ACO was way ahead of the game, miles before the big orchestras were in that capacity. But I mean,
but also you got to think that their overheads are much higher. Of course, they've got that there's a lot of traveling.
The travel,
it's huge.
yeah.
But so it might be a symphony orchestra, but it costs a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely, and I know they've done an extraordinary job this year to stay afloat. And
Yeah,
I know it was looking very grim there, like it was for everyone
yeah.
initially. But so the instrument that you play, the actual physical viola that you play now, which I know is sitting right there, I see the fragile sign. This is something that you started playing during your period with the ACO, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but yeah, we actually, I was lucky enough to be one of the people searching for a viola. So we had a benefactor who wanted to buy one, and so we just went off and we tried violas all around the world, in New York and Vienna and all over England, London, all over the place. And I even played, uh, oh gosh, William Primrose's Guarneri. Uh,
Wow.
which was incredible. But we were comparing them all actually to my instrument, my Smith, and we actually thought, oh, this Smith is better, So until we found this one, and it's just a Gianpaolo Magini,
Yep.
and to give you an idea of its age, think Beethoven and add another 150 years.
Unbelievable.
And the fellow who made it died when the plague came through northern Italy in 20 years after he made this viola.
So
So
we're talking early 17th century.
yeah, 1610, around about that.
That's
So,
unbelievable.
so unfortunately, uh, when I left the ACO, I had to give
Hand
it
it
back.
back.
So
Yeah.
that was a sad moment, but I'm very lucky to have the Smith. It's a brilliant instrument. Actually, I've lent it to William Clark, who plays
Yep.
with the MSO.
Yeah, I know William.
He's been
Yeah.
playing for years. But then this viola, they were still looking for a principal viola in the ACO, so the viola was being sort of shifted around, and the owner was like, oh look, maybe it would just be better. And he called me. I shouldn't say he or she called me up and
Yes.
said, would you like to play it? And I immediately agreed. And it's an extraordinary instrument, and I don't know what to say. It's definitely sort of an extension of, it feels like an extension of me, and to be sort of custodian of that history is quite extraordinary. It's an extraordinary thing. It's a
Well, you
work
don't
of art.
have,
An
yeah,
absolute work of art.
you don't have to say anything because I think it's time to hear that instrument. I think we should
Well,
jump to
actually,
your.
this is the Smith. So,
Oh my!
no,
My setup's just fallen over.
no. Sorry about that. No, we did this recording before I got the. But you'll hear what I mean about the Smith. It's a wonderful instrument.
That does sound incredibly good. Well, tell us about what we're going to hear. What's the first piece of music that we're going to
Um,
be hearing an excerpt from?
well, it's from Strauss's Don Quixote, which is a story about loosely based on the Cervantes novel Don Quixote, and this particular part is where you hear a conversation. Well, actually, it's just Sancho talking, really, talking to the Don Quixote. The Don Quixote is a questionable character. He thinks he's a brave knight, but actually he's full of crap.
Tilting at windmills.
Yeah,
And Sancho's his squire, isn't
yeah,
he? Is that?
indeed.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's represented by the euphonium, isn't it, or eupho, viola, and bass clarinet. So
Right.
so you'll hear it's just that Strauss's ability to tell a story through music it's quite extraordinary. You can
Yeah.
hear the conversation that's going on. You hear you can imagine the words. So let's hear
Well,
it.
let's have a listen to it. Oh, he's just a genius, isn't he? The character.
You
Just
hear the advice, you hear the proverbs, you hear the jokes, you hear the. I mean, he's not
yeah.
Sancho is not an educated man, but he's much wiser than Don Quixote.
Yeah, well, I should also point out that's a commercial recording put out by ABC Classic Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Sir Andrew Davis, playing Richard Strauss's Don Quixote and we haven't even really heard the cellist yet, but Daniel Müller-Schott. Yeah. We're about to, and Christopher Moore playing the beautiful viola part. That must have been fun to play. Is that what is actually your favourite music to play? This horrible question that everyone gets asked. I mean, is it that late romantic kind of Strauss-Mahler?
Yeah, I'd have to say so. I mean, that's why I chose, when I was thinking about what to play here, I thought, well, I'd get something where you can hear me, but it happens to be one of my favourite composers of all time. Just, it's all there. There's so many layers of complexity and he makes you swoon. When you'll hear soon in this next excerpt. When Don Quixote finally comes to his senses, and before he dies, he's just wandering around, realizing that his life has basically been a farce. So, I mean, you really hear that, and the depth of emotion you hear. The solo starts low, but you end up screaming in the stratosphere, and you can just feel the sort of what's the word?
Usually it's the word that you can't actually use because there is no word, and music has to do all the talking.
That's what the French say. I don't know what.
Je ne sais quoi. Well, let's have a listen to this second excerpt of Don Quixote.
Beautiful playing from Daniel.
I think we might have to jump in on that. Is there any way we can just turn that down a fraction? Just because...
Turn it down!
I'm sorry to interrupt this performance, ladies and gentlemen. We seem to have had some kind of technical issue with the distortion of the cello. Daniel Müller-Schott does not sound like that. We're not accurately representing his tone. No. It's a much more expensive instrument than that. Are we able to give that another go? It's running through a distortion pedal. Here we go. Amazing. And the
Very
other thing that hits me about this repertoire is how well the orchestra plays this stuff. I mean,
yeah,
you put that late romantic sound world in front of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, and something just absolutely magical
yeah.
happens, doesn't it? And with Sir Andrew conducting there as well, that must have been a real highlight. I
It
can
was
imagine.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why we recorded it. It's just absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
It's the greatest. And there's, again, lots of questions coming in. I'm going to get to those in one moment, but I wanted to ask you before we do about your ideas, which I know you've got, on the relationship with that music has with audiences, that orchestras have with audiences, on the function of music, and specifically the way that the traditions of the orchestra interact with the modern kind of concert experience. I mean, do you feel that there's a sort of a reimagining going on at the moment as we sort of continue to evolve the concert experience?
We've had a lot of time to think this year, as you can imagine, and actually, it was funny when you were talking about it before. Uh, just the thought of when that music stopped. Like when you say with the music's at weddings, there's music in films and whatnot. But essentially, when COVID hit, oh, we've used the C word. That's I thought we were going to avoid it, but yeah, that's when it went silent, and it was quite a shock, I think, to everyone. But it certainly given us a pause for thought, and I'm you know always sort of felt strange that the orchestra or the performers, they turn up and they go into the stage door out the back, and the audience come in the front door, and never the twain shall really meet. That there's no real interaction that goes on there, and I'm still trying to think of ways to kind of get around that, but certainly uh, already with a lot of conversations going on with musicians and whatnot at the moment, where we are thinking that we should be definitely more involved and more in touch with what the zeitgeist, I guess, of what's going on. So I certainly think that we're moving in the right direction. I think we'll be doing a lot of concerts sort of out more in touch with the city, going into places where we don't normally go, just to not, I don't want to say to be relevant, but to actually if I remember reading in an article a while ago that we're the sort of self we're the storytellers of our time, and we can't really do that if we're not reaching as many people as we possibly can. And so we're still thinking about it, and we're working on it.
Well, I think it's a unique. Yeah, that's right.
You and I have had many conversations about it.
Exactly, and it's a unique opportunity to actually to try things, to experiment, to see what works and what doesn't. I mean, the entire format of concerts is about to change. It's forced on us, to these shorter format concerts, and there's opportunities within that. And I think the next 12 months is going to be a fascinating chapter in a lot of these new things will stick. We'll realize, oh, that's actually better.
Yeah.
we should just do that all the time. Well, look, I have to get to some of these questions. Some of them are specifically, there's clearly some viola players out here. I'm telling you now.
Oh,
you've attracted I don't know, what's the collective noun for violas?
I can't say it on.
No. Okay. Well, what about this one? This is about tips for a young player, tips for a 10-year-old about to sit his AMEB preliminary viola exam. Do you find it hard to switch between viola and violin reading? That change. We've touched on that a bit, haven't we? But any tips?
Advice: be good to your mother. And
there you go.
That's not it.
Number one.
Well, I mean, I'm guessing you play violin as well. Is that?
Yes, it sounds like they're switching.
Oh,
yeah, more bread kneading.
I'll do that later. Don't worry about that.
No, do it. You can do it and talk at the same time. Surely,
sure. Just the last one.
Don't forget. Set another alarm.
It's actually that's the funny thing. What's this person's name?
I haven't got a name actually. Yeah.
Anonymous. The viola likes to be anonymous. I honestly, for years, when I started playing the viola, I struggled with the clef. I didn't know what I was doing. I just played what my desk partner was playing,
Yeah.
in the desperate hope that they thought that I knew what I was doing. But yeah, you do get used to it, but it just takes time. So and now I can pick up a fiddle and do okay. But all I can suggest is that you just do it, just practice. Basically,
Yeah.
it's just more about doing.
There's another question here about the connection between performers. How important is the rapport that you have with all the performers in the orchestra? And what role does intuition have in who you hire? I think this is kind of topical after your viola party last night, because
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sure that fosters the kind of connection that you need to play sensitively together in a section. Is that
yeah. I
right?
mean, we haven't really seen each other all year, to be honest, apart from
Yeah.
in situations like this. So yeah, you've hit on something there, like you said, intuition, and that
Yes.
that is that is really key. I mean, if you don't have it, you have no idea what's going on around you. But
Yep.
you, I mean, we all have it. We all know what's going on, but some people more than others. So it's key actually. And what was the other part of the question? I can't remember.
Oh, it was just the role of intuition in who you hire. So, I mean, there's that great moment you spoke about earlier with Richard Tognetti.
Yeah.
You do an audition. It's a big leap of faith in many ways. I know you've still got a trial to negotiate, but he's used his intuition there. I mean, does that come into it when you're listening to other auditionees?
Um, yeah, well, that's you touched on it there. That's why you have a trial. So
Yeah.
it's kind of difficult it's a really unreal situation, the audition
Mm.
situation. You
Yeah.
go in there and you play one or two concertos, a classical or a romantic concerto, and several kind of orchestral excerpts. You're just by yourself. You're not playing with other people. You're
Mm.
not playing with the whole symphony orchestra or whatever the excerpt is. You're just on your own. So you don't really, you can kind of guess, but you really don't know until the person sits in there and
Yeah.
does plays with you. So
And one person could fit your orchestra and not another one. It's
yeah,
very
yeah,
specific and different sometimes. There's another question here about what other violinists or violists have left you with a really lasting musical memory, and if you can remember something that really has stayed with you, why that is so.
mm. Well, it's tough because there's so many, and I
They go by so fast. I know. Well,
yeah
actually, you know what I'd love to ask you about, because I know that this person has your relationship with the violinist Patricia Kopachinskaya. Tell us about, because she's an extraordinary virtuoso soloist
yeah
and kind of shares with you, if you don't mind me saying, a slight fearlessness in their approach to music making. And you've worked with her quite a lot. Tell us about that relationship.
yeah. She's also known as the barefoot fiddler. She doesn't wear shoes in a concert.
The intensity is
Yeah, she
insane.
she is
Yeah.
incredibly intense. Like she came to the ACO actually having never really directed a chamber orchestra or anything like that before. So that was, and I think she actually wrote a piece on the plane as she was coming over. It was quite funny, but for us to play, yeah. And it's hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about her music without sort of talking about her. I mean, it's just so intrinsically her. She's just an intense sort of mind that is always, thinking and drilling in to the people around her, and just we just it was a very very special time. So
Yeah. You were saying you were going to be collaborating possibly with
well,
her.
I was hoping to try and get her out to sort of do a play direct with MSO, but then COVID hit. So
Oh, what a
yeah,
shame.
that was a thought. I don't even know whether she would have done it, but
Yeah. Well, this is, I should point out, the other role you play with the MSO is a curatorial role as the creative producer of the MSO Chamber Music Series. And I realized when the season was kind of, the first 6 months was rolled out, this was still being banged into shape, but it is now set, isn't it? And it's on the website. It's all of those concerts are there.
I'm not sure whether they're on the website yet, but that planning, it's difficult to kind of put it all together, where we had to sort of figure out what restrictions are going to be in place, what would be allowed, how many musicians would be available. So but that's been fun. Been putting together. It's something that I haven't really done so much of before, because I'm, being a half decent viola player, you kind of get asked to do gigs. You're not sort of running the show. So that's been quite a fun experience, and working with Matt Hoy and putting that program together has been, 2 programs together have been fun. So
yeah, well, that's something for people to keep an eye out for. And I guess that's also an important part of your life in the orchestra as well, is having the capacity. I think it's the same for not every musician, perhaps is kind of wired this way, but many are, and I think many more are after this year, of being interested in other aspects of the way that the orchestra runs and wanting to make a contribution in different areas. Yeah. And I think that's a really important role that you play. And I know that, I mean, have you noticed that amongst your colleagues, that there's sort of more buy-in to wanting to help?
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of think this whole idea that a symphony orchestra is just a symphony orchestra is a bit old now, and more and more players that are coming, that we have to be sort of flexible and have a passion for chamber music and other styles of music, etc. Like instead of just focusing on symphonic playing. So it's certainly happening more and more, and I think it's very, very important. I mean, even just having friends over at your house and opening a bottle of red and playing chamber music is a deeply rewarding kind of experience. And you can sit and have a chat to somebody, but if you play music with them, it's just it's you reach into their soul, and
that's right,
and vice versa. So it's the best fun you can have with your pants on, really, basically.
There we go. That's all we've got time for, everybody. No. I do confess we are running very short on time. I could go on and on, but we'll probably have to. I'm conscious of your bread. Do not forget what do you call it? Kneading? Is that what it's called?
No, it's just folding.
Folding.
Folding. That's too much work. No, this is folding.
I'm out of my depth.
It's quite wet dough, so you just fold it over a couple of times.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I'm conscious. I don't want you to forget that, but I could keep talking to you over another bottle or two of Tarrawarra Estate, Chris. But I should remind you, we do have rehearsal tomorrow morning, and I haven't been able to say that all year. I think it's a 10 a.m. start. I for one have to keep myself coherent for that, but I also should point out that the first rehearsal starts with a viola solo.
It does. It does. It's not meant to be a viola solo, I might say.
No, it's been reimagined. Well, everything's reimagined these days. So, look, Chris, the MSO is really lucky to have you. I'd like to thank you for your commitment to the orchestra and as we were discussing, your willingness to contribute to the artistic development of the group, and for your willingness also to go the extra mile in helping out in the many other areas of the orchestra who request your involvement. But most of all, it's for your superb musicianship, Chris, and it's always an absolute pleasure to hear you play, and you always inspire those around you. So you enjoy the rest of that lovely drop with Jill, and yes, do not forget, viola solo, 10 a.m., okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go on.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Chris.
Anyway, and thanks for your very kind words too.
You're welcome. I'll see you in the morning.
Okay.
So that brings us to the end of another episode of Up Late with Ben Northey. And gee, we're really putting quite a library of episodes together now. It seems so long ago when we started this series during the dark days of the Melbourne lockdown. And now I just feel like we're in one of the touchwood safest places in the world, and looking forward to a relatively normal summer, and especially the chance to see our family and friends as the holiday season approaches. And we'll also continue to keep in our thoughts all of those around the world in a less fortunate situation than us, and especially our musical colleagues who are doing it tough in the Northern Hemisphere and elsewhere. And hopefully the new year will bring better news from those places and from music making around the world as well. Well, next Monday night, I will be talking to another musical great from within the ranks of the MSO. It's the principal's second violin, Matthew Tompkins. We're making our way around the front row of the string section at the moment. Matthew has been in the orchestra for 20 years. How's that possible? I feel very old now, actually, having heard that. And I really can't wait to have a chat with Matthew, fellow Ballaratian from the great city of Ballarat, and not only handy with the fiddle, but also holds a bachelor's degree in engineering and science. I don't know about you, Chris. I feel old and lazy actually now. Yeah, thanks, Matthew.
I don't even think that well.
Well, like our guest tonight, he's a cracking bloke with plenty of good stories to tell. So join us next Monday when I'll also announce the special final 2 episodes for 2020, which have just been scheduled, and you don't want to miss them. The fascinating guests, more details to come. So I hope you can join us for those special upcoming episodes. Thanks for watching my chat with Christopher Moore tonight, for your questions as always. A big thanks to the team behind the scenes here who bring this show to you each and every week. Everyone out there, we are doing a fantastic job of holding this pandemic at bay here in Australia. Keep staying positive, keep taking care of each other. And whatever you do, before we meet again, go well.
Hi, Mum and Dad.